Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group, where we model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation of this great industry. This episode is part of Prefab Unfiltered, recorded live at Advancing Prefabrication. There's a big difference between talking about automation and actually building automated systems. Automation is not just software. AI is not just a buzzword. And robotics is not just a future fantasy. The real question is this: how do we build systems inside prefabrication that are scalable, measurable, and sustainable? That is exactly what today's conversation is about. Today, I'm joined by Ivan Yrupailla, Director of Materials and Prefabrication at Ambient Mechanical. Ivan sits at the intersection of supply chain, inventory control, and prefab operations. He oversees material strategies, safety stock, lead times, reorder points, and production flow inside the warehouse, all with one goal in mind: move as much work as possible into controlled environments so the field can install faster and more productively. If you care about scaling prefab, supply chain automation, robotics in construction, or building smarter operational frameworks, this episode will challenge how you think about the future. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast. We are recording live from Advancing Prefabrication here in Dallas, and I am joined by Ivan. Thanks so much for taking the time and being willing to
Thank you.
be in the hot seat for a little bit here.
Yes, I mean, it's it's really hot here, but yeah, I mean, thank you for coordinating with me in order to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ivan, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're from, all that.
Okay. My name is Ivan Yrupailla. I'm a director of materials and prefabrication at Advancing Mechanical. My company is specialized in MEP subcontractor activities. We are at the phase of trying to scaling up. So that's kind of the purpose of what I'm here. My ultimate goal right now is to trying to find ways to automate our current prefab operations in a way that it can be sustainable into the future. Right now, basically, I'm in charge of overseeing the materials for our inventory, try to set up the safety stock, the lead times, the reorder points. We stock our material for prefabrication, so we need to have them ready to go whenever we need to use it. And then I also monitor all the prefabrication operations, so making sure that each worker on the line and the assemblers are doing the prefabrication concepts in place, and then doing the final delivery to our job sites, right? What we want to do in essence is trying to do as much as prefab as possible in our warehouses, so the field can install the less possible so we can be more productive on site. That's at a higher view what I'm doing. But looking into the future, and as I mentioned earlier, we want to expand our capabilities in automation, not only in process improvement related to paperwork tracking, kind of data collection for taking decisions, and also doing better forecasts and estimation, but on robotics. I'm very inclined on the way to applying robotics in our production lines, because that's the future. That's what right now the current environment is leading, not only construction, but the whole other industries. Try to apply some automation and robotics into our current processes, so we can be ready to go when we want to grow and acquire other businesses.
Yeah, makes sense. So you said about automation. Started talking about it there a bit, but love to dig into that a bit more.
Yeah.
When you talk about automation, what does that kind of look and mean to you? Like, how do you define what's your scope of automation?
Yes, what I'm defining about automation is that we have current processes that, because of the legacy of what we have been doing in the past, are based on data entry, some of the manual work, and repetitive tasks. First, at a glance, we want to try to automate these tasks, applying some softwares, and then at the granular level in the operation side, we want to apply robotics in order to automate the pieces that our current personnel is doing in order to enhance productivity. Enhance productivity in a way that we know exactly how much we are spending the cycle time of a production part, and being able that data collected can be useful towards high decisions, right? That our upper management can take. So that's the basic. Rely on automation for scalability.
Yeah. Where does automation end and AI then begin? How do you delineate between those two?
Because in my opinion, from my perspective, automation, you need to kind of create the logic for that. You have to set aside, I have kind of meetings or between trial and error to try to set the concept of the logic to do the automations, and the repetitions through the time. That's the part one. And then the part two is going to be AI. Like it's going to be like machine learning and deep learning, like trying to generate the AI in order to know what your previous process are related on, right? So AI is gonna capture those automated processes in order to think and say, we can improve your automation by doing this, or based on your data collected, I think we should go towards this direction or to the other one. It's kind of in the future having AI to give us that support in order to take our ideas, right? Or setting up the direction as well on how our ideas are looking, or how are they shaping into the future, right? Automation is just as trying to set up the logic. AI is more of trying to generate a new logic based on the data collect, right, through automation. I'm seeing that difference right now, and I think that's going to be the future right now. We're seeing the expansion of the construction in data centers, and I think that AI in the next 10 years is going to be basically everything.
So when we're thinking about the automation piece of it and developing the logic, how are you guys going about thinking of those? What are those big rocks that we need to think about in order to kind of flesh out the logic to build the automation?
Yeah, so it's gonna be basically try to be on. First of all, we need to know what is our current diagnostic, right? How we're operating, right? But having feedback from the first line operators, right? What is our current status, and then based on that, we can review and set up the steps for future automation. Based on that, we can create the logic saying, this is our current status, this is what we want to be. So then let's mark the steps in order to reach that ultimate goal. And for that, we need to do like kind of a smart goal oriented activity. Let's say we need to define a timeline, we need to define the steps. We want to be fully automated, but what are we doing towards reaching that goal? Maybe we'll start with a part only, like saying some pooling being automated rather than being on a hat and paper or relying on Excel spreadsheet. So we need to take into account several pieces of our current process in order to make that reachable goal. So it's going to be a step by step, but we need to define timelines.
Yeah. So big question here, maybe. Who is involved in that conversation then to define the timelines, to define the logic and the automation that comes?
Yeah, so it's going to be a collaboration of everyone. Right now, I'm really thinking about in my departments for supply chain. We need the involvement of engineering, and also we need the involvement of the field as well. So both three areas, for sure, there are going to be other departments that are going to contribute, but I think that it will rely on these three departments to kind of set that ideas of how we want to look into automation. Because at the end of the day, these three departments play a huge role.
Yeah. So once you get the logic, you get the automation all kind of flushed out of where you're thinking about, then the question of technology comes into play. How do you think about what technology is needed to then come in and make everything work?
Good question. So basically, we want a technology that can be, so the technology that we want to choose need to talk to our current strategy. So we want a technology that focus on keeping our prefab strategy, that is our differentiation, like mass production on vertical stack, for example. We want a technology that can mimic our process, that can help us tracking, that can help us with the data collection, and that can really drive decision with the data being collected. Right. That's what we want. We want to have even more information to scale up.
Mm-hmm. So how do you identify that tech and then start to analyze, does it meet those criteria?
Okay. So basically, the way that we can identify that is we need to have a real scope of how we are going to present ourselves to a new software company, to try basically let them know what is our ultimate goals in terms of prefabrication, how we want them to help us. And based on that, we're going to kind of build a foundation for moving up and trying to work with them. But that's kind of really the basis, trying to say we want to scale up, we want to elevate our return on investment in XYZ years. Mm-hmm. Based on that assumption, then we need to work to it in order to build that kind of standard operational procedure of using that software. Mm-hmm. We don't want to change kind of our operation towards a defined software. We want kind of a software to be more flexible. Mm-hmm. It can be more open to our needs, so we can continue our operation without disrupting it. We want a software to be an add-on rather than a total change.
Right. And then a total disruption coming in. So to maybe put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's looking at a software provider that really comes in as a partner to say, okay, here's where you're wanting to go. Here's your business outcomes that you're trying to look for. Here's the needs that we see. Here's what the software can do. Here's maybe where it needs some custom add-on, or where that flexibility comes into play of how to make it unique to your environment. And
yes, right, because we want to stay with our current processes that are kind of mass producing in-house, and we want a software that can be able to be flexible in that way. And the more options that we have within a software, the better, because we wanna still be evaluating what are going to be their offerings. But mm-hmm. Yeah, in essence, it's gonna be like that.
What challenges do you think are really kind of front and center that are pressing either your company or the industry at large?
I think the construction has always been very paperwork process based. So we're now in the situation that 10 years ago, I'm being witnessing the evolution of AI, but it didn't hit these industries, right? But now it's hitting. So we need to take action.
Yeah.
And the only way of doing that is to try to automate things. There's no other way. We cannot rely in a kind of legacy way or old way of doing things. We need to really think about future scalability, and automation and AI is kind of the key for that. Mm-hmm. Without that, I'm not seeing any company that can maintain their competitive advantage. They're gonna lose market. They're gonna lose their actual share. Maybe not today, but in the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I may be in a bubble here, okay, which I most definitely probably am. But I feel like the construction industry has so rapidly changed some of the mindset of it, that it used to be the phrase of, oh, this is the way we've always done it, and so we're just going to stay with that. That was the dominant mentality, and it's still probably maybe the majority mentality, but not the dominant kind of default anymore. That people are much more open, even in the last couple of years, to new technology, to new workflows, to different automations and AI. It's really quite fascinating how that mindset has really changed a lot over the last couple of years. Have you noticed something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's most likely, and that's kind of the reason that we are here right now, right? Yeah. These kind of events were not possible before, because that kind of automation, AI, or technology was not the kind of priority. Right now, it's priority, and even more with the construction of data centers, right? Like there is a boom of building that, and the reason of that is AI. Technology is gonna push us to do things. And right now it's pushing us to do things. And this is the time to be at least part of proactive, because we're seeing the wave coming, right? But we don't want to be hit by the wave. We need to be proactive, and that's the reason that we're having these kind of events in order to making sure that we're developing, enhancing our competitive advantage, our differentiation strategy, how we are approaching the market, and definitely technology is the number one priority right now.
Yeah, and I would even argue that the wave isn't coming. The wave is we're riding it.
Yeah, we're right.
The wave is already here.
That's the current scenario.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Do you think that the technology changed enough that kind of forced the change, or was it a cultural mindset shift that started to change and get people more open, and then the technology came?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. People would argue and say, no, I changed my vision, but I will say because of the wave.
Yeah. I agree with you. Okay. Instead of a false dichotomy, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. But we can say both right now, like, because, I mean, we don't know all the people, right? But in my opinion, it's because of the wave.
Yeah. So we're at Advancing Prefab. Any main takeaways so far from the beginning of day one?
Yes, I love the speech from the president of
Compass Status.
Yes, very good speech. I 100% agree with the fact that we need to be humbled in order to accept things, in order to look in our mistakes. We need to be humble enough to recognize that, see how to correct them. Right? Yes, and that's a belief that I'm agreeing 100% with him. We need to build system. We don't want to build like a populist environment. Say, hey, no, hold on. Yes, check with me because let's work together in order to do that. I will tell you what to do, or let's fix that, or but at the get go, right at the top, like trying to create like an environment and saying I need to double check with my leader first, or I'll take that decision. No, we need to create systems in order to have that system to work. And we need the people that can support the systems. And we need the people within the system that work in there to tell us what are going to be the continuous improvement ideas, right? For example, when you go to the bathroom, right? The digestive system is telling you to go to the bathroom. It's not you telling, I think I need to go to the bathroom. No, the system tells you to do that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we need to do in the company. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
A system's telling you what to do, not specifically a person.
Right.
So that's kind of the mentality that we need to, switch or change. We need to be system based. We need to do. We need to check the processes, see if they need refinement, process improvement, and really focuses on the Kaizen and have the people, that feedback from the people, to set the foundation to have this process improvement, rather than just rely on directions that most of the time are not concurring with the system in place. So I'm 100% on that fact, and I think that it rely on us, on the leaders, on upper management, to trying to be humble enough to recognize that something is not working well. We need to take a look on that and then work as a team in order to fix it. That's the only way that you're gonna go up, because if not, then you're maybe working under incorrect assumptions, and you're taking decisions based on incorrect assumptions, and that's what that is gonna be originating solely hurting your company, not.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about systems and building that. I agree. What is the interesting thought that's coming into my mind that I'm trying to kind of flesh out as you're talking is, so you have these systems that are built up that are run on the automation, but in order to do that, need what's the most critical is the trust in people and being able to rely on them, trust their insights, their guidance, their logic, and how they're going about it. It's not a purely machine rules everything. It's having the trust in the people, building that foundation, having that reliability, and then using the technology as a tool, not necessarily the entire framework of it.
Yeah, we eventually, we are the humans, right? We don't want the AI or the future technology to take that our decisions, right?
Right.
We have like cognitive knowledge, and I know that right now AI is working through it, towards that, and always have the kind of sentiment analysis as well. But we want the robotics and the automation and AI to be a support tool for us to take the decisions, but we need the feedback from the first line operators. That's the truly feedback that is gonna tell us if something's working or not. The feedback and the continuous improvement need to come from the first line, not from the top line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So as we start to land the plane of the conversation, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. What is the phrase modeling the future? What does that mean and look like to you?
Um, yeah, so basically the future is going to be making sure that you create systems smart enough to letting you know that there's room for feedback, have a plan for that, and based on the system that you have, then take the decisions in order to have your organization thinking on scaling up. I think that's the only way for any organization to maintain their business. If they are not shifting their mindset towards creating systems and rather prefer to have a traditional management or traditional process, then I think that they're gonna be ended up losing their company. So I think that the only way is going to be have a technology to number one tool for support operations. Based on that, have your organization to grow sustainable and organical.
Yeah. Nice. How do people connect and connect with you and learn more?
Right, me too.
Final question for you. So if I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry. What would you pick to innovate?
Uh, like I'm not sure right now. I have different things, but for sure it's gonna be the way of approaching things first. Like, um, how do you take in consideration different scenarios in order to bring your primary idea for organization to follow that strategy? I think that's the number one point, because if you're making sure that your strategies are based on again systems, are based on defined processes rather than gut feelings or decisions on the go, that will generate inefficient processes, something to look at it. I think we need to start from the beginning, and that's what I wanted, that if I have the ability to change in the current industry and construction, toward technology, try to build 100% an efficient framework in order to look into the future. Why to resolve problems if you can fix it from the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. Ivan, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thank you for your time, and yeah, I love this time talking to you.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take: automation is not AI, it is discipline. One of the clearest takeaways from this conversation is that automation starts with logic, not software. Before you implement AI, robotics, or advanced tools, you must understand your process. What are your reorder points? What are your lead times? What are your bottlenecks? If the logic is broken, automation only accelerates inefficiency. Technology scales systems. It does not fix broken ones. Second take: first line operators see what leadership cannot. The people closest to the work often understand inefficiencies before executives ever do. If prefab and warehouse operations are going to mature, improvement must start with those running production lines, managing materials, and pulling inventory daily. Systems thinking cannot live only in the boardroom. It must live in the shop. Industrialized construction succeeds when feedback loops are real. And finally, the competitive window is closing. Automation in prefabrication is not optional long term. As robotics, inventory automation, and AI driven planning improve, contractors who adopt structured systems will gain measurable advantages in cost, speed, and predictability. Those who delay risk falling behind. The next decade will separate companies experimenting with automation from those building competitive operating systems around it. Prefab is evolving from craft to controlled production. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at greattech.com. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.